Hi, welcome to Hardwired the Human Algorithm. Now, we usually talk about AI in terms of productivity, innovation, or convenience. What you've heard is faster workflow, smarter assistants, better algorithms. But beneath all of this optimism, I want to speak about two entirely nascent industries emerging from this AI boom. And one of them is a business of reconstructing the dead, whilst the other is a business of replacing the living. And today, companies can build interactive AI replicas of people who have died using voice notes, using photos, text messages, or years of digital residue. Now, across the globe, this already has a very significant market. Now, mental health researchers have coined the term thanabots. Those are AI systems designed to simulate deceased loved ones, and some are warning that these may fundamentally affect and alter the grieving process itself for us as humans. But this conversation isn't only about grief, because there's a topic we've touched upon many times on this podcast, and that's because the same technology stack that lets a widow speak to her deceased husband is the same technology used in deepfake scams, financial fraud, identity theft, and emotional manipulation. The same realism that comforts a person can actually completely destroy another. Today's episode refuses the neat split between therapeutic tech and cybersecurity tech, because they're all built on the same foundations. The grief use case and the fraud use case actually run, as I said, on the same tech stack. Now, the psychological mechanism is identical. The only distinction is our intention, and that intention is completely unregulated. So joining me today is Jake Moore, Global Cybersecurity Advisor at ESET, and someone who's spent over a decade inside the forensic reality of digital identity, criminal infrastructure, and online exploitation. Jake, welcome to Hardwired.
Well, thank you very much.
So I'd like to start with not the technology, but something a bit more human and foundational. Now, for 14 years, you've worked in cybercrime. You've handled digital remains of people after they've died, like the phones, the messages, the photographs, browser histories from all times of the night, and lots of fragments of lives. And we talk about this data really casually and almost normalize it. But what does it actually feel like to sit with that digital residue of someone who no longer exists?
Well, I must admit, it always felt like I was in part of a TV show. It didn't feel real. I think that's the wonderful part of this, because taking away emotion probably helps out in that situation. You don't want to be thinking about who this is leaving behind, who this is hurting. In the police force, it might seem like you're trying to catch the bad guys, but really you're trying to help people. And by helping people, you can piece things together and people can get answers. And there are lots of questions when someone dies that those people are left with. And so if you can answer those questions in a way that puts peace to that, then you're doing a great job. It did feel strange, though, to be going through someone's phone and devices once they have died. But yeah, you get that sense of help and support by offering those pieces of information, because it's not all about evidence. Evidence would be there for a suspect if there was, say, something nefarious going on, but it can also mean other things as well. So the fact that we can use that technology is impressive. Sometimes there are issues in the way, red tape, technology that blocks it even, and that gets stronger as we go on. But really, we're looking into the future now. And what we've based it on over the last, say, 20 years is now all changing. And now if we can use that information in a whole world of creative ways, that's not just like a TV show, that's science fiction.
Yeah, it's incredible that everything we used to see 25 years ago actually has almost become a reality. But I'd like to map out the landscape, because I think people still do assume this is science fiction when it isn't. Can you explain how these systems actually work and how accessible they've all become?
So AI is incredibly powerful, as we know, in everywhere we look, and every industry is looking at it. Effectively, AI is just piecing together words in, say, chatbots and predicting what is next. But it's also able to look at images and predict the next pixel in the same way it looks for the next word. And so it can start to, say, look at an image, just a static still image, and potentially see how it might be able to move. And over time, learning all this information, hence why we've called it for many years machine learning, we've looked at that info and predicted the next move. So we've predicted the next word, and now we're predicting the next movement in that still image. If you throw on top of that a snippet of voice, that audio clip that only really needs to be 3 seconds long, which is crazy to think, it used to be 10 minutes just 2 years ago, that now we can create a potential video of someone that you don't even question. You think it's happened because we've been taught that seeing is believing. And now that is a wild thought that you could effectively question when that happened rather than if it happened.
I actually find I've had quite a few conversations about human consciousness, AI consciousness, which I don't believe in. And I find quite chilling is the logic behind it, right? Because these avatars don't require consciousness, they only require data, or enough data, as you said, like the 3-second clip. And it's distinguishable from the person themselves, right? So I think that's a really extraordinary concept to sit with.
Yeah. So, of course, like with any algorithm and data set, the more data you feed it, the more, let's say, real it is or it feels. So the more that you write in a blog, the more chance that AI would be able to create a blog that sounds like you, because the more you've written, it's learned your tone, it's learned the style of language, and it pieces together what it predicts you might have written. Hence, we've seen music like this. There have been people that have created music on the back catalogue of Oasis and created another album that the Gallagher brothers even said, wow, that actually sounds like us.
Really?
So if we can do that from music, we can then take that into other forms of audio, our voice and our tone, or we might say our jokes. The more we feed it, the more it knows. And then add on top of that the next layer, the video. You start to piece it all together, and really the mind can start to relax that it might be fake, and it might just take it on that face value. And when you're, say, potentially grieving, you might be easily able to do that. And this is a time when not everyone knows how their brain is going to work. And so it might be easier to slip into that situation where you forget about wanting to believe it, you just do believe it.
Yeah, I think you don't question it. That raises the question that I toil with in my work often, and pretty much nobody asks it. And it's the most basic ethical question when it comes to all of this data. Did the person who died actually consent to being recreated? Not the family, not the company offering the service, but the person themselves. Because we've built the ability to put words, kind of the emotions, the responses, the emotional presence into someone who can't object or say anything about it. And we treat it almost as though, like as a question about the living, and not about what the grieving person needs. We almost never ask what we owe to the dead.
It's brilliant. That's a question that we would never have even contemplated 10 years ago. All of this we'd never even thought of years ago. It would be crazy to think that. We would have thought it was too futuristic. But now we're questioning that. It's a good point, because who do we get consent from? But consent actually has many, many issues. There'll be people listening to this that have posted a photo of their child under 5 years old on a social media. This is happening all around the world. I'm not talking about just sticking an emoji on their face. They would have put their photo out there. They're proud. They want everyone to see their child. But there are ways in which we request consent of those people, and we tend to only think of those people as humans to ask consent from when they're maybe in their teenage years, because you can't always talk to them about the other things, like what is social media. That would be a big question for a 3-year-old, let alone consent. So if you look at it like that, we don't question it. We selfishly just put it out there to say, look at me. It's the same concept when it comes to someone who's died, that you don't think about their consent. You're thinking, this is a selfish moment for me, and everyone has to agree with that because I'm grieving. And that's a good plausible argument, But at the same time, so many people have died and the technology is available. We didn't have time or even think about asking them about their consent because it wasn't an issue. So really going forward, I think it could be an additional tick box in our will. I mean, this is mad just thinking about it off the top of my head. And it might be, well, would you mind if someone were to ever do this? And there'll be people out there that say, well, if someone wants to do that, then fine. Who am I to argue? I won't be around. And so really, it's about bringing it up. But as the technology changes, hopefully we've all got many, many years in front of us. But the technology moves so rapidly, there could be another question we should be adding to that in the future. So it's a really unknown area.
I mean, I totally understand it from a human perspective, and when you're grieving and just the desire to be close to that person in any way possible. I do see that as a potential use case, should I say, as though it's a product. That's awful, but that's where we have to think about
it. It is.
And you made an interesting point about people sharing pictures. But what I did want to ask, so when I've had conversations with parents now and friends, they are much more aware, whereas before they didn't know where that picture was going. They just thought no one realized that we are the product of all of these platforms, right? We didn't think that we are being monetized, we are being mined, our data's being mined. We just thought, oh my God, we've got a free system to actually share with our loved ones and our friends. But I think now it's almost impossible not to be aware of it, or maybe even the data I get every day is so related to what my work is. So someone who's not in that space is not going to have anything similar to that. But I just think with all the news, with everything, with every day now, we've got some sort of breach. So I don't think now awareness would be kind of a reason. But I do think that, yes, if I wanted to share a picture of my baby with grandparents who did not live in the country, I would have thought we should almost have implied consent to do that. I don't know.
Yeah. So what we are seeing, I think there's data to back this up, as more people are starting to use closed groups to send those images. I mean, what I really mean by that is WhatsApp groups to those people that, let's face it, probably want to see it. I don't think I actually want to see young family photos of people that I went to school with and I haven't seen for 20 years come up on my feed. It has no actual relevance to me in my life. No disrespect, it's just not something that I really want to see. But there'll be people that desperately want to see those images, and they are probably first and second relations in their family that want to see it. So there is a time and a place, but I don't think people are always that conscious about it. Or they might think they know everyone in their groups, in their feeds, but really they don't. And we're starting to question that, which is brilliant, but it is still slow at shifting that mindset. And also it takes more time to think. Maybe you've just had a baby. You probably don't have extra time to think, who could I send this to? Oh, I don't want to miss anyone off. What about cousin Jane, who's now living in Timbuktu? I mean, you don't want to miss people. So you'd think, well, a blanket, easy, done. We've had a baby. Let's put it out there. Great. And then you start to just add to that. And that's it. It's ease. And it's taken advantage of. So these companies, they want our data. Yeah. It's all about us being the product. And that's been pointed out time and time again. But I don't think people either care or really worry about that. We talk about micro advertising, how they understand all of our parts of our life because of what we're posting. So if you post a photo in a Facebook feed of kids, they know that you have probably just had kids. And so they might start advertising you with that because they can read the information in the image. But some people, it doesn't bother them. So I just think it's, as long as we are telling them that this is possible, that they can do micro advertising, they can add 10 years to that face and make it 10 years older. All of those concepts, as long as they're aware of that, then at least they've been able to think about it.
Yeah, or then they have we can deduce that they've made them an informed choice. But now, if we go back to the deceased, right, what if someone had access to their late husband's phone, his WhatsApp archive, his voice notes, and that's or could be handed over to a commercial company who can then build a complete replica of him, monetize him, and train their AI models on that. And that deceased person will have no legal recourse because he's dead.
Yeah.
And the law's so far behind. I mean, we're barely catching
Yeah.
up with those that are living, let alone those that have been deceased. But I don't know, did you see much? I mean, what's your thought? Given, and I want to reference that more to your policing background.
Yeah.
Like the
Well, yeah,
unauthorized
that's dangerous. It's really dangerous to start normalizing the whole handing over very sensitive data to a third party, but also to then create an avatar of that person, because there will be, let's face it, secrets to those people that have died, that those people that have died will want to have taken with them. And we have seen this. I mean, okay, so once, so we're obviously not going to mention any names, but once there was a situation where someone had died in a car accident, and the officer at the scene went through the phone. Now, what they're meant to do is they're meant to send the phone straight to the digital forensics unit with us. What this officer did was saw the messages and saw that the person who had died had an affair or was having an affair. So that officer, who was friends with the person who was now the widow, decided on his own to get rid of that phone because he didn't want her to know about that affair in the grieving process. And I'm sure similar things have probably happened around the world in these types of situations without law enforcement involved. That phone should have come straight to us, but he thought he was doing something good.
Yeah.
Therefore, let's park away from that situation and the ethical and the psychology that goes along with that situation. What if those messages are gladly given up without going through to a third party and commercializing it into something that you are not aware of? And it might not just be marital affairs. It could be absolutely anything. There are parts that I think should die with that person. But again, this is just me. Everyone has their own view on this. And that's the thing about grief, is it's a very interesting topic because everyone can have their own view. And so giving the options, the information, like this is everything that could happen. You choose what you want. But there is therefore a chance that it could backfire. It could even upset or just disrupt the grieving process into a tangent that you're not aware of or not familiar with.
I think we have more laws protecting IP more than we protect human identity after death.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Corporations, their brand has a larger legal defense than a dead person's voice, apparently. But there's also, what happens to the data when the company, say if that company who has that dead person's voice is data, gets acquired, who then owns that husband's voice? And would it only be the family member that would care? I mean, I guess if you're a large corporation, you'd kind of assume that, well, if I'm only affecting one person, I think I'm just going to go ahead. I don't think like the ethical mindset would apply to any of their checks and balances. It would just be right. That's our model. That's how much we can actually capitalize from it. One person, send her a letter, or if anything, if that and also it's dependent on that person or the widow be understanding what data actually is and what could happen.
So this will come down to the T's and C's in the application that you have chosen. There are going to be cases where the companies will own the data as much as the person that's uploaded it. it can't be owned by the person who has died. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. It has to be owned by the person who created the account. Those T's and C's can change at any point. If anyone is actually considering doing this, my favorite way of looking at T's and C's is pointing them towards ChatGPT or any of your chatbots of choice, and pointing it to it so you can then ask questions about everything that it's reading in the T's and C's, because we don't want to read through 5,000 lines of very small print that might actually not have anything to do with what you want to know. But you can ask it things like, what should I be aware of? Who owns the data? Will I be informed when policies are changed? These are the kind of questions that I would ask anyone to do anyway. It's actually not just for this process. T's and C's are the bane of a lot of people's lives when it comes to when it's needed. So that can be a very helpful tool. But unfortunately, a lot of these companies, if you haven't say paid for them, they will own the data. It's more likely that if you have paid, then you get more control over that data. But really, I think it's important to put things like a time limit on them. So there's applications that say the data here will self-destruct after a certain amount of time, is probably much healthier than what we do with most of our lives online. Is we create apps, and if we don't delete it at the end, then it does live forever. And that can be a problem, regardless of this being created as a grief bot. If we are dying, our data tends to live on in so many different apps. There are the better ones out there that say if you have not logged in, places like Gmail do this, Outlook, Slack. If you have not logged in a certain amount of time, usually 12 months, then we will remove all your data. That is clearly putting the people's data at front of mind.
Yeah. I mean, Facebook or Meta, should I say, they have the largest database of deceased people in the world. They could actually build something from the data they already have. And they have all the behavioral traits. I mean, it's quite scary that they've already got a product ready to build if and when they wish to. Well, it's also worth noting in terms of UK, we've got deepfake legislation, like concerns more about non-consensual, right? Non-consensual intimate images. And we've got consumer protection law. We've got data protection law. I think even in California, actually, they passed the consent provisions for posthumous digital likeness in commercial context. Yeah, but we have nothing like that here at all. The companies are moving so fast because this whole regulatory window of zero is open.
Yeah, we're desperately trying to move that along. So, the deepfake laws have finally changed in 2026 regarding consensual images, not just to go after who created the deepfake, but also who asked the software to create the deepfake. Because I think there was this grey area where a couple of years ago, we might not have been able to actually prosecute someone who has created the deepfake because they just said they used a third party. And there are unfortunately lots of apps, not just in the dark web, that will do this. And some of them are even still on the App Store, actually, that will do people in swimwear. And that's a major problem that we've got with tech, because it seems like it's in the too difficult box, and therefore it doesn't get looked at. And even though we have law, it doesn't really mean that those people are just immediately stopped from doing so, because they're getting away with it, because it's, again, in the too difficult box for the police as well. So really, people need to be aware that it's possible, make themselves as private as possible. And really that's difficult when so many people are chasing followers and follow accounts, to therefore have people that are looking at them on their social media when they don't actually know who those people are.
It's quite scary. So, I mean, to my knowledge, you could report it and then they had the powers to ask that person to take that post down or that video down. But by then it could have already been screenshot recorded.
Yeah.
and they have no powers beyond that, from my knowledge. Could you correct me if I'm missing something?
Yeah. Once something's on the internet,
Yeah,
it really is
goes
out
around.
there. Um, and that's a problem that I don't think many people understand. Even if they only use Snapchat, when things get put out on Snapchat, things are screenshot. They might know that it's been screenshot, but hey, by then it's done. This is just part of the internet, and growing up in that world where everything's online, it's dangerous. It's worrying for a parent and a child, right the way through to the afterlife, where that's when that consent is lost even more. So it's a difficult time for everyone. I don't think we need to rely on the government to help here. By the time that they've got round to this, it would have moved on again. I think they're still talking about NFTs in 2026, and I think
Yeah,
I was bought one of those for 4 years. And I remember thinking then, I think we should be thinking about AI law. And they were like,
yeah,
no, not just yet. And then it takes years before it goes through. And the online safety bill, I think it went through 7 changes of name over something like 9 years to actually go through. When I was in the high-tech crime unit, looking at digital forensics, I remember then thinking, we need to really sort out a law on everything that we're looking at here, because there was a massive grey area. And that was me thinking about it in 2009.
and then since then, I mean, by when the first Safety Act was announced, it was already 75% relevant anyway,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it doesn't even solve what it was designed to prevent, which is
I think
seems
it's
to
because,
always be the case right now.
yeah, that it's just too difficult for them. It's worrying, but they're also looking at the fact that these governments are sharing data, well, at least requesting data, I should say, from the big companies. There's money involved. It gets difficult. And if you then take out a proportion of a society in a country away from those big tech companies, they get upset because they might lose money through advertising and so on. And really it goes round and round in circles. And then everyone just thinks, well, how do we protect ourselves? And unfortunately, the onus is always on the user or the parent of the user to guide them. And so few people understand those genuine risks.
Do you think, like, the large cases which have been lost by big tech over the last couple of months in New Mexico, California, do you think that will actually have an impact? Because now there's a further case saying they now need to redesign the way the product features in terms of the addictive nature.
Yeah.
So I feel that there is more possibility now. I do feel a bit hopeful, but where do you see this going?
So if anyone listening isn't aware of those very addictive features, they are part and parcel of most kids' lives, with, say, scrolling, the endless scroll, often called doom scrolling, and having a score that goes up daily when you send images to your friends. That is extremely addictive. I see this from my own point of view here with a 13-year-old daughter who's constantly spamming her friends backwards and forwards to keep that snap score going
Oh
up.
God. Yeah.
I can control how long she goes on that phone or on those particular apps for, which is a brilliant technique that's added as a feature on these phones. But you can't stop the addictiveness. And the fact is, my daughter going on a school trip in a month to France, the biggest worry she has is her snap score is going to go right back down to 0. And I hear this from many parents. So if the government in the UK cannot agree on what age social media should actually start at least let them fight the addictiveness and have an end to the scrolling. Have, like in the old days of Facebook, I remember it was only able to have 300 stories. Once you had got to 300 stories, and that actually took quite a while, but once you got there, it said, I haven't got anything else. It wasn't based on adverts and so on. Now, of course, it would go on forever. But there was an end to it. And if they were to bring that back in, I think it would just help people realize for them. But it's about money. And all of these things are about money, whether it's social media, whether it's grief bots or mining data, it all comes back to money. And when there are shareholders at the top, they will say, keep going and keep fighting, because we want everyone addicted to their phones so we can make more money.
So this is an interesting question. So I was speaking to a large Meta shareholder, and he's a parent. And I asked him, look, do you know what this actually does? Are you aware, number one, or are you so busy that you kind of read a headline and then you move on? And do you have issues with, he's got older teens now, probably, no, not older, 15 and 17. And to him, his answer was, well, I didn't really see a direct negative effect. They're both doing really well at school. That was his benchmark. And I said, what about from a mental health perspective? Or, do you know? He goes, oh, the wife manages all of that. So really, he'd isolated himself from any meaningful consequence. So therefore, because I was saying, look, how can you justify keep on put, if you're a major, you're not just a minor shareholder like, retail shareholder like the rest of us. It's, you could actually have some clout. What would stop you? Why is this stopping you? And I was almost trying to reach the human person in there, but it's almost not worth having that conversation, because he had already distanced himself from any consequence. And I think that's where they all are. They look at, as you said, money. They look at where the finance, where can they extract the most money from? And I just thought, gosh, if something really awful happens to one of these tech heads' children, and I know it's an awful thing to say, but I just think maybe they'll realise if something does happen, if there's a consequence. In fact, not unfortunately, but most of the CEOs have very young kids, so they're still so behind in how their teenage minds are going to, how the teenage minds of their kids are going to work, right? They could have sent them to Montessori schools, blah, 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 all of the, everything to avoid them having screens. But essentially a donkey can use any type of screen. So really their child just has to see something to have, for a few times to then have that addictive mechanism placed in their mindset. And I almost am wishing for something like that to happen, just so they can realise. Or are we just dealing with I'm going slightly off tangent here, but it's almost like we are dealing with psychopaths here who have no concept, no empathy. And I do understand the capital model. I was part of it for so many years, but there was always a line, right? Always a line where you think, no, this is just bordering immoral. And that's where I feel we're sitting today. The whole world seems quite immoral. And now going back to the voice cloning, sorry, because I know I just went off in a tangent, but seeing is that it's the exact same tech that does the voice cloning, but it would also allow a grieving parent to hear their child's voice again, right? But that's the same voice being used in financial scams, impersonation, fraud. So when the psychological mechanism is identical, like what can we do? I mean, you've seen it, you've demonstrated it. Like in controlled environments, tell us what happens.
Well, the software is incredible, and it really can duplicate someone's voice and likeness. I've never tested it on the psychology of how it makes someone feel. I have tested a voice note cloning via a stolen SIM card, so a SIM swap, which is where I cloned someone's phone number and I stole their WhatsApp this is with permission, but I then from my my hacking phone, I was then able to send a voice note which sounded like a CEO to the financial director. And then with that, I was able to manipulate them to send money to my personal account, because I was telling them that I'd forgotten to pay someone. Now, the psychology used there was just rank. So I was the CEO and I was speaking to the chief financial officer to say, get this done. It's got to be done quick because I've forgotten to do it. That's influence. If we look at one of those, say, powers of influence, it wasn't emotionally attached. It wasn't a relationship between, say, mother and child or any other familiar relationship. This was to do with boss and CFO. they, after 15 minutes, did actually send the money into my account. So I knew that it was possible. But if you look at it, it kind of makes sense. I actually spoke to the CFO afterwards, and she said, well, anyone would fall for that. And I agree with that. I could fall for that. It came in a thread from the WhatsApp chat they'd been having. It sounded like him. It was the kind of thing he would do. That was one of her lines. But be late. He went off on a Sunseeker from Bournemouth to the Isle of Wight with the client to go and have a few drinks and eat some lobster. Typical him on Friday afternoon. And she's there left with, clearing up what he has to do. And it was only £250 and she sent it. So it's possible. That's just a one-time transaction. Of course, I then tell everyone what's happened. But if you bring in familiar relationships, where's the end of that? You can get addicted to that. The whole point of a grieving process is it starts really, really bad. And then time is the best healer. They've always said that. But that's because there's been a point in that life when that person has stopped. We could go, hey, we've had videos of people. We've got videos of it and we keep watching them. But it's a one-way interaction. It's just you're viewing it. If you have a two-way interaction with that person, I can only guess that that grieving period will just extend to potentially put you into another state of grief because you would potentially still want more.
Yeah. I mean, if we think about the younger generations who are accustomed to talking to AI chatbots, as an example, or just for their homework or for brief chats, then would they not become quite accustomed to an AI replica of a dead, right? In where the voice and the image, it would sound so authentic. And if you spent 6 months before that having conversations with AI that sounds exactly like your deceased parent, then your whole model of does this mean the person is real would have been completely recalibrated, I think.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't stay private. Right, that would be at population scale almost.
And I don't think we'll ever fully get to grips with genuine research on this because we can't argue the grieving process. We know that. And however far or deep into the grieving process they are, and they're arguing that they prefer it with this grief bot, it's a personal journey for them. But we could potentially never get to the end of this. We can't regulate this. All we can regulate is who has access to what data. And that's something I think more and more of us need to even consider. And we probably haven't before. I would start, by the way, by looking at all the apps on your phone and the ones you do not use, go into them, delete your account, and then remove the app. Don't just remove the app off your phone because the data lives on their servers if you do not do that. So it's a good starting point to minimize that footprint you've left behind because once you're gone, other people won't be doing that for you.
Yeah. I mean, I did forget to mention, because there are dark web services that offer cloning of real voices. And my father died in my early 20s, and I didn't really have, there was no video, there were hardly any videos or voice that I could actually capture, but I did find one, and it was really grainy. I couldn't hear it that well. I wouldn't have necessarily identified it as my dad, but I did do this when I was looking into cloning, and I gave it to a web service, which also then I had to give my data to, which I can't now delete by the way. But it wasn't, you didn't even have to give a great deal of data actually to this service, to be fair. It's nothing what can't already be publicly be found. But within 7 minutes, I had something that came back that sounded quite like my father.
Yeah.
And that, I just thought, and that was about a year ago, I think, that scared the hell out of me because I'm thinking, wow, it scared me because of how easy it was. And actually, I was very close to my father, and it's still, when you get triggers as you get older, different things trigger you in a different way. You have acceptance, but some things just get you. And I just burst out crying. I just thought, my God, I can hear him. And I just think, wow, in my young 20-something, how would I have even managed that? How would I have handled that? I think had I had the access and not thinking, and in my state of grief, I probably would have done that.
Yeah.
I wonder that. Oh gosh, I would never have gone through the process of grief that was absolutely essential for me to go through. The stickiness, the humanness of grief.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry about, even for a grief aside, even for the chatbots now, the companions. You don't learn to have that stickiness, the humanness, the, just uncomfortable conversations if you're dealing with a always self-affirming model. Again, I've gone off on another tangent, but
Well, I get that. And everyone's going to have a different thought on this. I mean, I put it out on LinkedIn, and I had dozens and dozens of comments, all opposing or fully opposing or fully for it. People tend not to really sit in the middle on this.
yes.
And it's a really black or white answer. The only thing it did make me think is I actually want to try it and create a digital me and have conversation with me. Tongue in cheek a little bit, yes, but to try and test it and to see how good it really is. My wife thinks I'm crazy to think I could be actually doing that. But no, I don't think I'd actually want to ever have my kids have access to me once I've gone, because that's just me, but they might think differently. But yeah, I think it's opening up so many questions we've never even thought of before. And that's what's so hard hitting. Yeah.
I mean, then we're going into exploitation. Like, this is all very dark, but in terms of, I think people should know about it. Like, it's specifically when I think of even my own mother, when we're looking at widows in general, they're a very easy target. Like, the vulnerability, and there's so many, as you know, so many well-documented fraud attempts beginning hours after a death announcement on social media, and that's a problem when, yes, you want to let people know, and they have to come to this place for the wake or for whichever ceremony, but any obituary post or memorial, fraud and impersonation begin, right? And so, have you dealt much with that?
I've seen funeral scams. They were big in COVID times throughout the pandemic. This person wanted people to donate to this particular website, and all looked quite legitimate, and people were falling for those. And again, that's because they looked genuine and they felt right at the right time. But scammers will always jump on anything that they see and take advantage of it. That's just the nature of them, and they're very good at it. And again, it's not, the onus is back on us as the human to question it. But it's very difficult when you are emotionally involved in something like grief, which is when you're not thinking straight and you're not thinking about how to look for those anomalies. And it's not just a case of looking for spelling mistakes anymore. It's far deeper than that. And these websites can look incredible. They can be very easily manipulated. I can copy any website in 5 minutes using AI tools that are legitimate. They're not illegal. You can buy them just online. You can copy any website and it will do it absolutely like the original. And this is what's happening. And so you can abuse any particular group of people, but a widow, it's an extra punch in the stomach to that widow who is already thinking about something else, to then be potentially taken advantage of. And that's what we have to protect, but before it happens.
So it's already a fully organized criminal market, right?
Everything is.
So, so the supply chains are already there. What can we actually do aside from, be careful, manage your online presence? What could we actually do? Like, what would be quite helpful if we don't want the grief tech business industry to not be this? Well, could we do anything?
Well, it's actually in the hands of the next people, the people left behind. Because if you've explicitly said, do not do this with me, there's a chance that at the moment, someone still might do that for you. Yes, there could be a law that comes out that says, no, we need video footage of that person saying that they give explicit permission to do so. But that might be 30, 40 years before they actually die. And even if you had that footage, it's not going to look like that person from 40 years ago or 40 years later. It's just not going to work. Plus, it can be manipulated. Plus, there's also going to be a website out there that's dodgy that goes, well, we don't need consent. We'll just take your money. $200 and we'll make anyone for you. We'll make someone living if you fancy it. Because those processes are possible. It's just data. It's just algorithms. It's just AI and tech. It's easy. All of this stuff. If you can make an audio clone in 7 minutes that you can listen to perfectly. In fact, I think now it's even quicker than that. You can just see where it's going. So even if you were to film yourself saying, yes, I explicitly give permission for any company to make a copy of me, I mean, I might not die for 50 years. And so it's kind of irrelevant. And so it's the too difficult box again. So I don't think we're going to really be able to protect people massively from this. And you're always going to have the argument of, they're dead now. Their data doesn't have the same, it doesn't have the same weight that it did 10 days before.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to move back to children because that's close to a lot of the work I do. And if we're looking back, if a child loses a parent and they're surviving, the surviving parent gives the child an AI replica to soften the loss, so the child can still speak to their father and the father can still say goodnight. Now, I get that impulse to do that. And I think it's human to think, it's human to want to do that and to keep that person alive because the love would just make it so complex. But mental health researchers that I've spoken to recently, especially those working in childhood bereavement, have saying that it's a developmental concern that they're seeing increase. And they said, look, children at certain ages, broadly under 7 or 8, they don't have a consolidated understanding of death as a permanent fixture, right? They have, for children, it's almost reversible, temporary. And so it's the physical absence of time is what partly helps the child to understand and consolidate that loss. Until they begin to understand and experience the pain that person's gone. But if the person isn't gone, then they're still on the iPad almost. So
well, I think there's two ways of going about that. There's the one where you just create a one-way communication, which is the words good night, for example, where they can't interact with it because they might already have that.
Okay.
I've done lots of podcast, radio, and TV. So if I were to die, my kids could go on YouTube and hear my voice saying all sorts of things, usually about cybersecurity. But there is lots out there that, and we know of people that do listen to, I don't know, a voice message over and over once someone's gone. And so making AI use that audio to say the words good night might actually help in that grieving process because it's just a little snippet and they might already have that from a video. Do you know what? My kids have actually got that video because I have sent them audio clips in the past when I've been away saying good night over WhatsApp. So they'd better go and find it anyway. And that might be something that they listen to. That doesn't need consent because I've already made it. And regardless of that, the issue I have with is when it's two-way, because then that flips the brain to thinking they're still around and you don't know what's going to come next. When you got an audio clip that says the words good night, you know that's all it says. But if I then say how was your day and you don't know what's to come, that's what flips the mind and the psychology. But really, what does a kid need if they've lost someone? It's not AI. They just need love, regardless of who that's from, guardians, parents, family. It's surrounded by a village, and that's what helps people get through the process.
I forget actually when you present it in that form, there is so much nuance in terms of circumstance and amount of conversation that's out there. That's interesting. I mean, grief is painful because love is real, and AI is a mathematical model. But if technology, which I mean, a lot of the tech firms are trying to do this, right? They are trying to remove almost the finality of loss, but they are fundamentally interfering with developmental mechanisms, which, to be fair, they've done that for the last 10 years anyway. But
Yeah.
they're already trying to take away the ability of humans being able to process reality itself.
Yeah. God, I don't know how to answer that one. Yeah, they are playing with emotions, and I think AI has really made that happen in the last few years. We've seen people look, we've seen people have relationships with AI, girlfriends, boyfriends, friendships, and it takes off. We're seeing less and less physical relationships occurring because of what happens online. That's before AI got involved. So that's one step. The second step is AI, and there are AI relationships widely used amongst teenagers, and to a certain degree, I think that's fine. I haven't really got much of a thought on that, apart from just please be aware of where your data is going. Try not to say anything too sensitive into a data pot that is collecting that. Understand where that data is, how it's stored, and what could happen if it was compromised. But apart from that, which is a big one, then if it helps with any part of their life, then I'm all for that. It's just, on a whole, it could be damaging in the future, but these are the questions that we don't need to ask.
So all of this technology arrived with zero oversight or ethical architecture that could potentially have held it more safely. And no one really seems sure whether all of this belongs under, well, what we've spoken about today belongs under mental health regulation, consumer protection rights, data rights, deepfake, or something entirely new that doesn't have a name. And I'm kind of leaning towards something new, but something agile and fast. What are your thoughts? Because you're much more aware of enforcement challenges.
Enforcement is a major problem. We know that technology moves at such a huge pace that we can't keep up with it. So trying to regulate it or put any sort of restrictions around it's going to be difficult. And we're finding major problems with that. And then to top it off, we've then got different jurisdictions. So the UK will have a different rule to France, and then we'll have a different rule to the US. If we bring in countries like China, they don't care about rules. So it becomes a real problem. Where does that data live? That's dependent on the app that we're talking about. We know that's been a problem with TikTok. TikTok was arguably going to be thrown off the App Store unless it moved one of its locations to the US. I don't know how they've got around that, but somehow they have. And this is it. People bend the rules, and the different jurisdictions will always be a major problem. So trying to enforce it becomes more and more difficult. Again, the onus is back on us. Educate everyone and educate your kids.
Yeah, I think that's a good roundabout view for us all to engage with. I also want to be a bit more cautiously hopeful, because I'm aware a lot of this is quite heavy. But for you, what would good actually look like right now with the constraints that are upon us? What would actually look like?
In terms of what?
Because we've spent like the best part of this mapping out the landscape. That is quite alarming. And I don't want to soften it, but I also think I don't want to create despair or disengagement, right? And that's exactly what people building this technology are counting on, where we feel almost apathetic because it's just too much, so let's just bury the head in the sand. Yeah. So in terms of, it doesn't have to be utopian, it's something that's realistic, achievable, and doesn't require us solving the most difficult problems first. Like more about the obvious ones. What can we really get to?
Well, companies will always look to make money wherever they can, and come up with ideas that we've probably never thought of, and therefore they will work for a certain number of people. We've got these dystopian ideas that are very Black Mirror-esque, that are going to potentially change our future. But minimizing data is a major part of this. Do not just freely give away your data. And that can start as simple as if you're shopping online, don't use your main email address, right the way through to don't give it a clone of your voice and your likeness. The in-between bit's huge. And so the more we play with tech, the more we realize what's possible. There are still many people that have no idea this is even available. And there will be people, particularly older people, who have no idea that this technology is available and that you can clone someone. They're of an age where seeing really is believing. And if you're seeing a video of someone, it must be them. Of course it's got to be. It can't be anything else. And, I understand that. They've gone through a life of not being surrounded by technology. And so it's a strange world that we're moving into, and very quickly. So if you've got kids and they're using apps, I say download the same apps, play with them, learn them. Yeah. If there's technology out there that is available, play with it and learn it and see what's possible. Mm. And then we'll be much more educated to make those more informed guesses and more informed choices about what's ahead.
I want to thank you for coming on today. For families navigating bereavement, if you're considering any of these services, read the terms, as Jake mentioned before, put them into T&C, put the T's and C's into ChatGPT or any model that you're using and get a summary in simple layman language so you know what you're actually dealing with. For schools and parents, this is where a lot of my work sits. The conversation about digital identity needs to start earlier. I think we teach children about online harms and in terms of strangers' passwords, deepfakes, but we need to be teaching them about digital footprints and not just data, right? It represents them as a human being and as a person. And it's not a frightening conversation. You can open up so many different realms of thought process that you probably wouldn't have known your children have. And that's definitely what I've discovered with mine and with other children I work with. And if it's quite an empowering conversation. It will start off sticky and messy, but that's about agency. And what about from a policy perspective, grief, in terms of grief? The grief conversation is happening in mental health forums. What can we do from a policy perspective? Right. That's one thing I did have a note. Yeah.
I don't always agree with how policies are written. These days, a lot of people are just using AI, ironically, to create policies. They don't have any human touch in them. And even if they do, they don't always last or get adhered to. And so really, I think policies are just created for policy's sake. And that can be a sticking point for a lot of people. Bearing in mind that law is different around the world. Law is not written yet. And if it's really that brand new with stuff like grief, grief and bots, then the policies are not really thought of about long term anyway. And so be aware of them, but this is about making your own mind.
I mean, I think the question is no longer whether the machines can imitate the humans convincingly. We're already there. The question is whether we are prepared for a world where imitation becomes emotionally indistinguishable from reality. And right now, I don't think we are. But Jake, this is a really great conversation. So that was Jake Moore, Global Cybersecurity Advisor at ESET. Jake's ethical demonstrations of voice cloning, social engineering are really worth finding. They are among some of the most clarifying things you can watch on this subject. All links are in the show notes. If this episode raised any questions for you about your own data, your family's digital footprint, I'd love to hear from you. So Hardwired, the human algorithm, explores AI ethics and what it means to be human in the age of intelligent machines. If this conversation was useful, sharing it is the most direct way to help reach the people who need it. Thank you.
Thank you.